So our topic today is attention, memory, and executive function skills. And it is my pleasure, along with Aladini Rao Dugar, the co-founder of Listening Together, Director of Parent Empowerment, and myself, Uma Soman, Director of Professional Development and co-founder alongside Aladini, to welcome you all to the last webinar of 2020. This is the 8th webinar we have done. We started all the way from key concepts in language and literacy with early communication and vocabulary and language, and moved into academics and social skills. And now, finally, the final one, attention, memory, and executive function skills. Both Aladini and I are teachers of the deaf with multiple years of experience. I am also a listening and spoken language specialist, auditory verbal educator, and mentor professionals interested in LSLS, auditory verbal certification. I speak English, Marathi, and Hindi. Aladini speaks English, Kannada, Tamil, and Hindi. So you're welcome to ask us questions in any of those languages, and we will do our best to answer them. If you are more interested in hearing this information in Hindi, we will be offering the same webinar tomorrow in Hindi and invite you all to join us. So Listening Together is a not-for-profit educational organization. Our mission is to empower parents, train professionals, and engage with communities around the world to transform the lives of children who are deaf and hard of hearing. We want an inclusive world for children who are deaf and hard of hearing, where they can achieve their personal best without being constrained, without being limited by the financial resources and geographic location. We are independent and fully funded by donations from people like you and grants and such. And we are not associated with any hearing aid or cochlear implant company or product or any other organizations. We offer 3 key programs, one on parent empowerment, one focusing on professional development, and the last one being public awareness. And these webinars are part of our public awareness program. I will talk more about I'll talk more about the 3 programs at the very end. So stick around if you would like to know more about what it is that we offer. But for now, we want to hear from you. We want to know if you are a parent, family member, professional, student, or interested community member who might not fit into any of these categories. The language you speak, if this is your first Listening Together webinar, and the device you are joining us from. So I have launched a poll and I would love for you to respond to it. So we have a sense of who is in the audience today, and it helps us manage our examples and such. I see the answers are starting to come in. We'll wait a couple more, well, another minute, some more seconds. Excellent. 63% have voted. I would love to see a couple more people vote if possible. Thank you. Thank you. I see a comment that was sent just to the panelists that says Hindi mein upalabdhata ke liye ayojak ko abhar. We are very happy to provide this information in Hindi, and we hope that you can join us tomorrow. Just a quick note, when you type in the chat, you will see that you can send your answer to just the panelist or to panelist and attendees. When you are sharing a comment, it would be great if you can share it with panelists and attendees. If you have a specific question that you would like to ask about the information that is being shared, please feel free to ask that question in the question and answer section, Q&A. All right, and with that, I'm going to end the poll and share the results. Look at that. We have almost an equal number of parents, family members, and professionals. That is always good to see this level of partnership. We always love having students, so welcome students. And thank you to the interested community members who are here to learn more about attention, memory, and executive function skills. Fantastic. So many returning folks, and a majority, like always, joining from their mobile phones. So I hope this formatting is just right for you. So attention, memory, and executive function skills is a big, broad topic. And planning for this webinar was not easy because there is so much to talk about. So this is what we are going to do. Think about this webinar as the beginning of an ongoing conversation. Today, we will talk about what is required for learning and progressing. What is executive function, if that is a new concept to people in the group? And how does hearing loss impact attention, memory, and executive function? So the way I have structured it is we are going to talk about attention, memory, executive function in general. This is applicable to all children. But then we will stop and talk about how does hearing loss or having limited listening and language skills impact development of attention, memory, and executive function. As you have questions, please put them in the question and answer box, exactly like Aladini said. We might answer them as we go, or we might wait and answer them at the end. Okay. So I imagine many of you have had this experience. You say to a kid, pretty much of any age, turn off the TV, clean up your toys, and get ready for dinner. And what happens when you say that? The child turns off the TV, cleans up the toys, and gets ready for dinner, right? Probably not. It might look a little bit something like this. The child goes to the TV and stands and keeps watching the TV instead of turning it off. Then they turn around and walk over to their toys, and instead of cleaning up, play with it a little more, and then go do something else. And then maybe after you have said like 5 times, it is time for dinner, come on, come sit at the dining table. Maybe then they come and sit and do what you have asked them. Does this sound familiar? Let me know in chat if this is the scene in your life. Is your child following directions exactly like you asked? Or is it this roundabout? I'm seeing some responses saying yes, yes, yes. And knowing the people, I know these are children of different ages. So that's interesting, right? And you're thinking to myself, oh my goodness, why is this so difficult? It's such simple directions. I just asked 3 things. Turn off the TV, clean up your toys, get ready for dinner. Why is this so hard? Here is the reason why. Hold on just a second. I'm going to change something on my side real quick. So that, oops. So that I can see better. Excellent. So let's think about what it takes to turn off the TV, clean up your toys, and get ready for dinner. To follow these directions, the child, and sometimes, like, people like husbands could also benefit from this. Hear the directions, understand the directions, follow the directions. There are 3 things that need to happen to complete the task that you have given, which is following multi-step directions. Now, what does it take? What is required to hear the directions, understand the directions, and follow the directions? For all people, when you are hearing the directions, that means you are using your auditory skills of listening to hear the directions, but also you are using your attention skills to pay attention to what is said and remember what is said. So it is auditory skills plus attention plus memory. Great question in the chat, sign language question mark. If that is the case, then it's your visual skills. So the visual skills of taking in what is signed, paying attention, and then having the auditory or visual memory for what was said. Now you have to understand the directions. So you took them in either through your eyes or your ears, but now you have to understand what it was that was said, right? So do you understand the word toys? Do you understand the word turn off the TV, whether it's spoken or signed? You still have to pay attention to it and you still have to remember it. And then comes the very difficult task of actually doing it, following the directions. And that requires executive function and self-regulation. There is this saying in many different languages, you can take a horse to the river, but you cannot make it drink the water, even if you take the horse to the river. And in some ways, following directions is that, right? Children might hear it and might understand it, but it might not actually happen. And that is a result of executive function and self-regulation. So what I would like to do today is talk about each of these concepts individually as concepts. And as you are listening to this, think about the children in your life. Either they are children that you personally have, if you are a professional, these are children that you work with, whoever these children are in your life, all the way from little babies, 0 years old, to teenagers and young adults, because we know that the development of executive function and self-regulation is happening in many individuals well past the age of 22 years. There is some research that says that executive function skills aren't fully developed until the age of 27. And later on, I'm actually going to say to you that it is never too late to work on this. So be thinking about the children you are working with, but if this reminds you of any adults, also be thinking about them. Attention, very simply, this is what we hear a lot. My child does not pay attention to online learning, but can pay attention to cartoons for hours. Sound familiar? We've been hearing this a lot since online learning started because of the COVID pandemic. And as we are taking that into account, just a couple things to keep in mind. Paying attention during learning requires focusing on the information, listening and understanding, processing the information, and it is dependent on the age and stage of the child. So typically, I am a teacher of the deaf, and when I'm planning my lessons, activities, when planning for children under the age of 7, the rule is age of the child plus 2 minutes. So a 7-year-old is going to pay good attention for 9 minutes. There are children who can pay more attention. There are times when children pay more attention to a particular activity over another activity, because attention is also dependent on the topic of what is happening. I'm assuming watching cartoons is more fun than online learning. Task expectations. Watching cartoons, you just have to sit and watch, not really do anything. Versus an online learning, maybe the teacher is asking you to do something, or you have to write down something, or there is some task expectation. And then there is the cognitive load. when what all is your brain being asked to do? Listen, watch, think, pay attention, answer is often what is happening in online learning versus sit, relax, enjoy fun cartoons. And that is a big change and shift in those two situations. Another aspect that is important for children who are deaf and hard of hearing, or even adults who are deaf or hard of hearing, auditory access. Paying attention to something that you can't really hear well because of distortion or because of glitching or because your hearing aid or cochlear implant isn't mapped or programmed appropriately so that you can hear everything that's going on is difficult. Speech versus noise discrimination might be something that takes away your attention. If there is a lot of noise, if there is disturbance in the signal, that will impact how you are paying attention. And for many children who are deaf and hard of hearing, listening fatigue is a real thing. It is true for all children. All children get tired towards the end of the school day after they have been listening and paying attention for so long. But it is especially true for children who are deaf and hard of hearing, who are experiencing the tremendous fatigue from working so hard to listen. There is some research that is starting to happen that is showing that this might also be true for children who are signing, that they might also have something called visual fatigue. So, just be mindful of that. And I'm going to stop here for just a second to see if there are any questions, comments, or thoughts about what I just said about attention. If you have a comment, put it in the chat. If you have a question, put it in the Q&A. If this feels like, okay, yes, this is good, then give me a thumbs up in the participants or say something in the chat so I know where we are with this. We have somebody saying, yes, listening fatigue is something they are seeing. Oh, this is a great question. Oh, sorry, let me see if I can fix this. Okay, the question is auditory attention dependent on age or, wait, sorry, is auditory attention or attention in general dependent on age? This is a really good question. And I would say attention is general dependent on age. But when you think about auditory attention, also think about the child's hearing age, the amount of time that they have, the amount of experience they've had taking in auditory information and paying attention to it. Another question is auditory attention related to maintaining constant attention like in a classroom? Yes, all children have to maintain constant attention, but children who are learning to listen through their hearing technology are doing extra work. If you are interested in this, then I would highly encourage you to go to the, let me just type this, the Vanderbilt University Listening and Learning Lab, I think. And you can find more information about it. I see lots of comments in the chat, and I'm hoping that they are comments. If there are questions, please put them in the Q&A. Don't children who are deaf and hard of hearing also get visual fatigue from watching everything around to summarize? Yes, absolutely. Does unilateral or bilateral implant matter mainly to reduce listening fatigue? Great question. I think there is research that says binaural benefit, so hearing with two ears, is important for attention fatigue and speech perception. I don't think there is research or clear understanding about unilateral versus bilateral in terms of listening fatigue. But if there is any, I think it would be at the Vanderbilt Listening and Learning Lab. I'm gonna wait on a question about auditory memory. Oh, this is really nice. I'm just gonna put this here. We have Charles writes about listening comprehension developing in the mid-teens. Prior to that, people rely on reading to be able to comprehend the information or message being delivered. How does that play into the concept? So this is interesting, right? We are talking about listening comprehension and then relying on reading comprehension. But for many children, listening and understanding spoken language is happening before learning to read and understanding what is read. So I would say there are two phases to this. We have to learn to listen and learn through listening, move into reading, and then move back into listening and reading comprehension together. Great questions, you all. Another question, as time goes by, can implantees train to discriminate between noise and speech? Yes, absolutely. There is specific training for this. There is another question about, can auditory training based on music perception improve attention? There is some promising research showing that music perception actually helps, or like training in music actually helps with speech perception, as well as figuring out what is speech versus what is noise, which again we know is impacted in individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing compared to individuals who don't have hearing loss. I'm going to answer this question later. All right, great points. I see there were lots of comments in the chat, but I know Aladini has answered them or redirected them. Let's talk about memory, another big area, which I'm only going to talk about for one slide. A lot of times we hear, I spend hours practicing lessons with my child, but she doesn't remember it in school. Or we hear from professionals, we spent 2 weeks talking about this vocabulary and this concept, but it's gone now. And that is not surprising because, again, memory, and when we think about memory, we are thinking about short-term memory and long-term memory, as well as working memory. So let me talk about these concepts real quick. Short-term memory is when you remember something for a short amount of time. Long-term memory is when you remember something for a short amount of time, but then you process it some more and it goes into your permanent long-term memory. So this is like, when you are in first standard, maybe kindergarten, you are learning 2 plus 2 is 4, 2 plus 3 or 3 plus 3 is 6, 4 plus 4 is 8. For a few days, for a few weeks, it's still in your short-term memory, but eventually it goes in your long-term memory because you have to know it for life. You've used it enough, there is enough repetition, there is enough value in remembering it forever. I always think about how I remember Bollywood songs from the 80s and 90s, which was my time. Even now, like, do I really need to remember all the lyrics to some random song that Akshay Kumar was in his debut film? But the reality is, it is in my long-term memory because it had a lot of value to me at the time. Working memory is where you are not just hearing and remembering things, but you are holding it in your memory to manipulate it. So a lot of working memory tests are where children are given a span of, or a sequence of digits. So I say, let's do this together. Okay, you're going to type your answer in the chat. This is what the test actually looks like. So I say 1, 2, 3, and you have to say it back to me. So what will you say? 1, 2, 3, and you say 1, 2, 3. Okay, now we're going to change it, right? I'm going to make it harder. I'm going to say 3, 8, 9. 3, 8, 9. Very good. Next one. 4, 7, 9, 3, 2. Very good. 4, 7, 9, 3, 2. Okay, let's keep going. 2, 1, 7, 4, 9, 3, 1, 6, 8, 1. Okay, so how many of you are typing as I go versus listening to the whole thing and then typing, right? It's getting harder than 1, 2, 3. Let's keep going. So this is the digit span forward. Now we're going to do it backward. So if I say 1, 2, 3, you have to tell me 3, 2, 1. Typically, when this test is done, there is no option to write it or, anything like that. So I say 1, 2, 3, you say 3, 2, 1. All right, let's try another one. 8, 4, 1. Type the number backwards. Very good. 6, 2, 6, 1, 6, 3. Oh, it's taking longer. Here we go. 8, 1, 8, 6, 6, 3, 4, 7, 9, 1. This is much harder, right? And even then, I was giving it to you in chunks. 818. I was giving you phone numbers. I was making up phone numbers and saying that. Some people can do this. Some people have a really hard time. Research done on children who are deaf and hard of hearing shows that working memory deficits are not uncommon in children who are deaf and hard of hearing, which is paired with their auditory memory, the ability to remember what was heard, what was presented auditory only. There are some interesting research papers that talk about when working memory is compromised, complex language development is difficult, can be compromised. So just keep in mind that memory and language learning are very closely linked in children who are deaf and hard of hearing. Also, memorizing something, which is common for school and such, memorizing something is not the same as understanding something or applying it. You can memorize something and pass a test, but then you don't really know what you studied or learned and can't apply it. And memory is again dependent on age and stage. It is dependent on topic, task expectations, and cognitive load. We know kids who remember crazy amounts of facts about dinosaurs or cricket or Bob the Builder was a very popular thing to think about for a while. Children who memorize songs and just know them by heart. So the topic, the task expectations, and the cognitive load matters. And often, if we teach children strategies to memorize something, to remember, oh, maybe there's a trick here to remember something like NEWS, news, north, east, west, south. That's a trick. That's a mnemonic to help learn something. So the learning strategies that a child has and knows will also help. This is applicable to all children, not just children who are deaf and hard of hearing. But think about how this is impacting what how this is impacted by maybe difficulty listening, maybe difficulty understanding speech, vocabulary, language structures, reading, etc. Okay, there are some more questions, so I'm gonna answer them. Is there a critical period for extending auditory memory? I don't know if that is, I don't know the answer to that. I do know that typically we want to work on auditory memory in a systematic manner. And generally, 4 unrelated directions is as far as we take it in terms of auditory memory. Maybe 7 related numbers or instructions. That's why phone numbers are area code plus up to 7 digits. That's the upper limit of most people's auditory memory or verbal memory or visual memory. So that's the average there. I'm reading the question. Okay, I'm going to answer this later as well. If there are questions, please put them in the Q&A. I want to switch gears and talk about executive function, where we will talk about memory again. Executive function and self-regulation. Is this a concept? Okay, let's do this. If you don't know what this means, or if you haven't heard this before, please put in chat, no. Do you know about executive function and self-regulation? If not, put in chat, no. I want to see where I need to start with this explanation. Okay, lots of no's. That's great. I'm glad we are having this webinar. So Aladni is going to post a link, which is a guide to executive function. And a lot of the information that I'm sharing today comes from this resource. The Harvard Center on the Developing Child is a fantastic resource, especially for executive function and self-regulation. So we'll share that link with you in a minute. But think about executive function and self-regulation as the steering wheel that guides your thoughts, actions, and behaviors. Without this steering wheel, you would just be all over the place. And I'm going to explain to you what that means. Another way to think about executive function is, you know how at an airport there are planes that are landing and planes that are taking off, and the air traffic control tower is the one managing who's landing, who's taking off, who needs to hold, who needs to rush, who is where, knowing where all the planes are. Executive function and self-regulation is like your air traffic control system. And you can imagine when the air traffic control system is not working well, planes might land and take off and crash, and who in the world knows what will happen. So think of it as the steering wheel of your system or the air traffic control of your system. And the components of executive function, and again, I've copied this directly from the Harvard website. It depends on 3 types of brain function, 3 types of things that are happening in your brain. The first one is working memory. So there was a question about, is working memory related to execution of learning? I think you'll find your answer here. Working memory governs our ability to retain and manipulate distinct pieces of information over short periods of time. So the working memory exercise we just did with numbers, think about that as, in daily life, it's those multiple step directions. Remembering the 3 things that was said, maybe the instructions are before you turn off the TV, or before you come to dinner, turn off the TV, but also clean your toys. Okay, so the first thing that happened was dinner, but that's not what I'm supposed to do first. Before I come to dinner, I have to turn off the TV. Oh, and then there is one more thing. I have to clean up my toys. So that's how it plays out in real life. In school, working memory plays out, for example, in learning to read, in the reading and segmenting, where you are saying, put these sounds together. Ba, ta, r, l, I. If you can't remember all of them, you don't know I just said butterfly. It plays out in math and science and social studies, in reading literature, in remembering information that you have learned that you are carrying on. So that is working memory. Mental flexibility helps us to sustain or shift attention. So notice they're not saying attention, but they're saying mental flexibility, because attention is one part of executive function where you figure out what to pay attention to, what to not pay attention to, and when to shift your attention to something else. It also applies to remembering different rules in different settings. So, for example, if you're having a conversation with your friends, the rules of having the rules of language with your friends are different than the rules of language in the classroom when talking to a teacher. So that kind of mental flexibility that is often difficult for children who are deaf and hard of hearing is another component of executive function and self-regulation. And then the final component is self-control. Self-control can take many forms. Self-control can take the form of, I want that toy, I'm just gonna grab it. And that's okay, not really, but okay for a 2-year-old. But if a 6-year-old starts doing that, you say, oh, that's not right. Self control is, knowing, oh, I really want to play this video game, but I have to finish my homework. So I can't play video game right now with my friends. I need to finish my homework, which is you are setting a priority and resisting impulsive actions or responses. Self control is also when somebody says something you don't agree with. You can either say, oh, what do you know? You don't know anything. Or you can have the skills to disagree in an appropriate manner. Working memory, mental flexibility, self control. These are key components for learning, absolutely, but for life. So we know again from research that executive function and self-regulation is necessary for school achievement, you can imagine, for positive behaviors, right? If you have good self-control and if you know how to pay attention to and what to ignore, there's going to be a good chance that you have positive behaviors and positive relationships. It's actually associated with good health. I mean, self control, right? If you set your priorities to wake up in the morning and work out because it's good for your health, but you don't have the self control or you are not setting the priorities to actually do that and follow through, it will impact your health. So, people who have better executive functioning and self regulation tend to have better health. And then finally, for successful work, because again, all of these things are going into helping you be successful for yourself, within your family, within your school, and within the broader community. Let's look at it one other way. Executive function in self regulation is necessary for doing all of these things. So take a second and read, and I'm going to look at the questions and take a sip of water. We had a question, why did I put attention memory with executive function? I hope you have gotten your answer. If not, post a question again. I will answer the question about bilateral unilateral later. And how do we help children attend better will come at the end also. Okay, questions, comments, thoughts about the key concepts of executive function and self-regulation. Next, we're going to talk about the development, what factors impact, and what activities you can do. So those questions, hold on to them. But I'm asking if there are any thoughts or comments or questions about these key concepts in general. Okay, I don't think there are any questions or thoughts coming our way. If they do, we will answer them. Um, does executive function develop automatically? I'm going to answer that next. Is language and executive function related? I'm going to answer that next. Perfect. Okay, then let's just get there. So executive function and self-regulation. Let me ask you this. Are children born with with executive function and self-regulation skills? Yes or no? Just type in chat. Okay, so the majority answer seems to be no. There are some people in the middle. All right, next question. Maybe I should have made a poll for this. Do you think executive function and self-regulation skills can be taught, developed, made better? Yes, the answer to that is a yes, and that is great. So children are not born with executive function and self-regulation skills, but they can learn and develop these skills. And the way to develop those is one, through engagement with, and input from caregivers. Anybody who is around the child, strong relationships will lead to more and better executive function and self-regulation. And I'm going to explain that on the next slide. These skills are developed through a variety of experiences. The more opportunities children have to try out different things, good things, like things they really like, things they might not really like, and so on. Safe environments and relationships where they can learn and explore and take risks. Executive function and self-regulation only develops when children have the opportunities to be in safe environments and relationships. And then we know that this development happens, a big jump in this development happens between the ages of 3 and 5, but very much dependent on what has happened between 0 and 3. And then it progresses after 5. And then again, in teenage years and young adulthood, 14, pretty much all the way to 22, you see another big improvement in executive function and self-regulation. A lot of risky teenage behavior is associated with difficulties with executive function and self-regulation. So a lot of teenagers driving, making bad choices while driving, or taking risks, physical, emotional risks, risky behavior on the internet. A lot of that is associated with executive function and self-regulation development. And then finally, like I said, while 3 to 5 and teenage years are the big times of development, it is never too late. Even adults can benefit from executive function and self-regulation coaching. And Aladni is going to post another link about it that shows how practitioners, so professionals, can support adults develop their executive function skills. Sometimes we hear from professionals saying, you know what, this family is just struggling. They are not able to follow through on therapy. They are not able to bring the child to school or complete homework. This family is just struggling. We don't always know why they are struggling to do what you are telling them to do, or what they said they would do. Take a look at this handout that was just posted in the chat. I think it will give you some starting points and some things to try out with your families who might be struggling, maybe with the diagnosis of hearing loss, maybe with the therapy and teaching involved with it, maybe with managing children in general. Okay. So actually, let me go back. So take a second and think about these 5 things. Engagement, experiences, environment is what is impacting development of executive function and self-regulation. So when we don't have this, surely it's going to impact even more. So I very quickly put in 3 things, but I want to talk about these 3 things in addition to the impact of hearing loss. So lack of support from adults will impact how children develop executive function and self-regulation. If no one is talking to them, if they are not doing serve and return with an adult, whether it is verbal, non-verbal, through spoken language, in the home language, in English, in whatever language, in sign language, in cued speech, whatever form of communication that is, if there isn't a lot of serve and return, it will impact how the brain develops. And when the brain architecture, when the building of the brain is impacted, it does impact executive function and self regulation. So, for many children who are deaf and hard of hearing, there are minimal opportunities for serve and return. And that is something that impacts executive function. As I am saying this, people think to yourself, okay, and this is something I can change to help children develop executive function and self regulation. So, by increasing opportunities for serve and return, you can support development of executive function through engagement with caregivers. A lot of times, for children who are deaf and hard of hearing, we see that their strong relationships with adults are only with 1 or 2 people in the family, often the mother and hopefully the father as well. But the child needs the whole family, the community to support the child's engagement with adults, caregivers, other children to develop executive function and self regulation. So, your action item is I will involve more adults from the child's life to help my child practice serve and return, to help my child engage with caregivers and get input. Limited opportunities for play and teamwork. This could be related to limited listening or language and speech skills. And if it is if a child of any age doesn't have the language to play with other children or participate on a team or engage in group work, or has the language but is not understood because their speech isn't great, it's going to limit their opportunities to play and engage in teamwork. So the action item is I, as the parent or the professional, will support development of listening, language, and speech skills and create opportunities for play and teamwork. Often, we are going to have to practice these skills within our learning environment before children can practice it in a generalized setting. And again, I'm saying this for children who are deaf and hard of hearing. However, all children benefit from this kind of practice and intervention. Nobody has to like sit and do therapy or sit and teach this, but you are embedding it and incorporating it in your interactions. So the limited opportunities for play and teamwork could also be related to lower expectations. Oh, this child is deaf. How will he or she play? Oh, this child is deaf. They might not be able to participate in group activities. I'll give you an example from my personal life. I have a younger sister who is deaf. And when she was in 9th standard, she was in a mainstream class. She was in 9th grade. She was the vice captain of her school's dance team. Everybody else was hearing. She was the only one who was deaf and wearing hearing aids. And she was the vice captain of the dance team because the team decided that she was best for this position. The team, other girls her age, did not see that a deaf person was going to be their leader. They saw the leadership skills that she had, they saw her dancing skills, they saw her grace and whatever else, and she was team captain. I wonder if other adults would have given her that chance because of our own expectations. So just, food for thought. And sometimes limited opportunities for play and teamwork come from the parents and professionals focusing constantly on, oh, you don't have time to play, we have to do these flashcards. You don't have time to play, we have to do this. You don't have time to take a drawing class, we have to go to speech therapy. So finding a balance between those will positively impact executive function and self-regulation. So again, your action item is to help parents find a balance between all of these needs. And then finally, and this is key, this is crucial, stressful environments, which has toxic stress, violence, neglect, abuse, all impact the brain in a very negative manner. So children who are physically punished, who are hit, who are not given food as a punishment, it is impacting their whole body, their brain, their heart, their soul. It is definitely impacting their executive function and self-regulation skills. Because what they are learning is when somebody doesn't do what is expected, you have to punish them physically. So the self-regulation aspect is impacted by stressful environments, by toxic stress, and by experiences of violence, abuse, and neglect. When children don't feel safe, they will not learn. So the safety, the physical safety, the emotional safety of children is key. A child who doesn't feel safe will not be willing to take risks, will not be willing to ask for help. So make sure, so action item, let's think about the physical and psychological safety of the children, the families that we work with. So we only have one more slide that talks about how to actually do all this. But before we go there, I want to do just a quick check-in. What are you thinking about? What is an aha moment? Or what is a kind of moment? Please share in the chat or make a note to yourself. It's not like you have to share with us, but take a second and reflect. All right, we're going to post one more link in the chat, which is going to be an action guide. Absolutely, all of this can impact theory of mind. And that was a topic we just did not have enough time for. But theory of mind, the ability to understand another person's thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and opinions, and acknowledging that it might be different than what you know and believe, is the theory of mind. We can share some resources. There's a question about category moments. Oh, I think the question here is just a prompt for you to think about, aha, like at what moment, at what point in this webinar did you think, aha, this is good? Or you thought, I have to think more about this. That is all I meant by moment. Okay, looking at the time, I really want to do this. The activities guide from the Harvard Center for Developing Child from infancy to adolescence. There actually, you know what, I'm just going to click on it and it will take us there. So the activities guide is here, and what you can do is you can download the entire one, or you can download by age. There was a question about how do we figure out if there is a delay, what is age appropriate, what happens before age 3. You can find all your answers here. Let me just very quickly show you what this looks like. And it starts at the very beginning. It gives a little bit of a definition. And for those who don't feel comfortable reading this in English, copy it, put it in translate.google.com, and the translations are pretty good. So for 6 to 18-month-olds, how are you going to be working with them? What are games for younger infants? What are some hiding games? What are some role-playing games, conversations, so on and so forth. And it goes all the way to older kids. I'm gonna very quickly just slide this down. I hope nobody gets dizzy by this action. But all the way to children who are 7 to 12-year-olds, like what are some games with cards you can play? What are some physical activities you can do? What are some music and singing and dance activities you can do? What are some brain teasers you can do? And I want to, like point out that, at the very beginning, it says, oops, sorry. It says peekaboo. So in the US, peekaboo is what we say when you are doing peekaboo. But when I grew up in India, in a Marathi household, we would say bua kukuch. So I want you to know there is no magic in the words peekaboo. Use the words that are appropriate for your home, your language, your culture. The magic is in playing with the child. So maybe it is peekaboo, maybe it is bua kukuch, maybe it is something else altogether. But look through this and think about what is it that you are already doing that is supporting the child. And here is a very quick summary. Conversations and storytelling are supporting executive function and self-regulation. All kinds of games, active games, hiding games, card games, board games, are supporting executive function and self-regulation. Reading books and stories and singing songs are supporting executive function and self-regulation. Imaginative play, creative arts, shared explorations. And again, this is true for all children, not just children who are deaf and hard of hearing. So if you have children in your life who are not deaf and hard of hearing, you should feel free to use this with them also. Another question we often get is, oh, I don't have time to pay attention to my other children because I'm so focused on my deaf child's therapy or teaching or whatever. This is a great way to include all the children in the family, maybe even the neighbors or whatever that is, um, to play these games that are going to be good for everyone and allows you to help the child create opportunities for play and teamwork, support with language and speech and listening and social skills while developing executive function and self-regulation. Oh, I love the little Malayalam translation of Peekaboo. Thank you for sharing that. And this is, my final question to you. Think about your interactions with children. I am sure, more than 100% sure, that you are already doing some things that promote executive function and self-regulation. Maybe you didn't know that until now, but now you do. So think about how you can intentionally build self-control, mental flexibility, and working memory into these interactions. And then think about what else can you do to support the development of executive function and self-regulation. go ahead and type in chat. We want to hear from you what it is that you are taking away. And I'm going to take a look at the questions really quickly. There are some questions that are very specific. I think I will answer them individually and separately. There is one question here. I would like more information about this question. So the question seems to be, there is difficulty paying attention in the class, but at the end of the day, you have to catch up on the learning. How can you do that? My suggestion to you would be to really think about, is this the right class for the child? If the child is having such a hard time paying attention in the class, and then go from there. And if this is a specific question about a specific child, you can contact us directly and we can talk more about it. I see lots of responses coming in. People are going to have more interaction and play and dance. That's great. Playing and dancing is always good. Role play and pretend play. Reading while the child is sitting on the lap. Lots of unstructured topics. Relationships are key. All right, I am going to guess, based on my limited Spanish skills, that the person who just typed said that the resources are quite interesting. Thank you. Thank you very much. Increasing imagination, talk to more adults about the child, have lots of fun and play with the kids. Absolutely. Have playtime and have bedtime stories and make up stories and dramatization. Simon Says it's a great game. Yes. What about gamification and video games? Again, lots of research out there about how that is good and useful. I personally worry about making everything too gamified too early on, where we lose the beauty of natural interactions. So that would be my only real make sure you are thinking about, because video games are, kids learn from it, they can, there is self-control and skill and whatnot involved. Just be thinking about what is it replacing and is it worth it. There is a question here, can you give more examples of mental flexibility? Sure. So mental flexibility is your ability to think in many different ways, not be rigid. There is never one single answer to something or one single way to do something. So an example might be when you're reading a story, right? You say to the kid, what do you think will happen next? There are many different answers. There's many different possibilities. And maybe you say one thing and the child says something else and the third person says something else. If the child says, no, you are wrong, there is only one answer, it's telling us that they are getting too structured, too rigid. So there has to be flexibility in the ability to think, in the ability to figure out what to pay attention to, what to switch attention to, what to ignore, and so on and so forth. This is very short time to explain all of this, but I encourage you to again go to the Harvard website and look at those resources. And if you still have questions, you can always reach us. We are accessible via many ways: WhatsApp, social media, etc. I encourage you to sign up for our YouTube channel and our social media accounts, because as we finish this webinar, we will be spending the next 2 months posting videos from previous webinars as well as resource sheets, etc. And then when this webinar is over, we will have our post-webinar survey. There is a question this time that asks you to just share with us what more you would like to learn in 2021. So this year we focused on language and literacy development. We are thinking about what to focus on next year and would love to hear your thoughts. Our online courses for professionals will be announced soon. Oh, so this is what I was saying. Under parent empowerment, we work with parents individually and together. Aladini is our director and will lead all of those meetings and interactions and trainings. For professionals, we have online courses that are always approved by the Alexander Graham Bell Academy for Listening and Spoken Language. And these are courses for teachers, therapists, any professional who is working with a child or many children, and it is on various topics. And then we have these public awareness webinars, as well as these, we have a book called Stories of Maya and Sid, which is part of our public awareness campaign. And it's a great story about Maya, who wears 2 cochlear implants. She moves to a new place and makes a new friend, Sid, who has many questions about her cochlear implants. This is a great book to use where children can see themselves, but you can use this book to explain cochlear implants to others as well. And that is, it. We have done multiple webinars this year, and we look forward to sharing resources with you. And we really appreciate your support. This has been a fantastic experience for both Aladini and myself, as we have engaged with so many of you through this avenue. We really appreciate your support. And if you think the information we are sharing is good, would benefit somebody else, please share our website and our resources and our social media posts. Expect some big changes with availability of resources in multiple languages over the next several months. We are really working hard towards it. If you think this is information more people should hear and understand, please invite us to present at your organization. We have presented at multiple places or centers in India. We have invitations to present at more, and we are happy to do that, even if it is in the middle of the night. So please consider inviting us to share this information with your organization. And if you feel moved to support this work with your money, with your very hard-earned money, please donate to us so that we can continue to do this work. You can donate via our website, via Facebook, via Instagram. We appreciate the support that you are providing us to continue to do this work. With that, I want to thank you all for coming to this final webinar of the year. I know there are some of you who have attended all webinars this year, and a special shout out and thank you to you all. And that's that. As soon as I click on end meeting, this webinar will end and a survey will pop up, and we would love for you to please, please, please do that survey. Oh, I see there are several questions. If you could please message me these questions, that would be great. Theory of mind and executive function, I can talk more about it individually. Talking to parents about all of this, look at the Harvard resources. There are so many great videos and such to help you with it. All right. Thank you all. Bye.